teachers, senior members, and my dear fellow junior members. Today I feel utmost joy and delight for having this opportunity to stand here and share my thoughts and candid views of what so far has been my learning experience from these enriching assemblies. As I stand here, I'm happy to state that so far by now, what my experience from these assemblies has been in a way more insightful and profound in nature, because most of the topics discussed here are frequently talked about at home, and I have more opinionated view, enabling me to develop my insights far more deeper. For past few sessions, we have paid utmost attention to the theme of asking. Of all so far that I have gathered, and if I may put in simpler words, asking is the process of life that is inevitable in each of the circumstances. We need to ask, rather, we must ask. There is no point in confining ourselves to the walls that other people enthusiastically built for us. We need to come out of shackles and ask, be more curious to ask questions and the things happening around us. People may tempt us to take the way that leads to lots and lots of ambiguities, to take advantage of our innocence, or maybe sometimes our ignorance. They make us feel there is no option left but to blindly follow them. But remember, there is always another way. We must interrogate the wrongful acts happening right under our nose and demand an answer for it, because abandoning truth leads to losing one's self-worth. Socrates once said, "Life that is unexamined is not worth living." In order to make our life worth living and meaningful, we must ask that too in humility. We all must learn to be simple, and that's when we can preserve our purity. It is our purity is lost. If at all our purity is lost, our personality automatically gets polluted. We can't stay stationary in life. We need to explore ourselves and learn to appreciate the beauty that we see, the positivity around the simplest of the things around us, but we forgo them most of the times. Positivity is developed into us when we are enthusiastic, even for the minutest of the thing that we do. This enthusiasm must not be curbed. It should not die within us. It should prevail. We must make sure that when we are here at Stephens, we make optimum use of our young, energetic, and ebullient personalities, which eventually leads us to be more and more creative. We should not be conceited. Rather, we should take every opportunity that comes in our way as a way to learn. Because at the back of mind, we should always possess the attitude of improving ourselves, then proving. And regretfully here I say, that's what we mostly do. We prove ourselves. I would like to conclude by saying that make use of every opportunity landing in your way. And remember not to fall in any of the temptations. Learn to resist. If you resist, then you may find the real meaning and self-worth to your life. Thank you.
Yesterday, we asked a question. What was the question? What was the question yesterday? We asked a watery question. What is a watery question? What does this river mean, right? Okay. Actually, the question meant, what about the familiar things in life? We take a great deal for granted. We believe that they have no significance for us. The great painter Van Gogh found immense significance in a pair of peasants' shoes. That shows his greatness. All right? In contrast, it has become a fashion in our times to dismiss everything in a kind of condescending fashion, to crib about everything, to place oneself continually in a state of dissatisfaction, as though the degree of one's dissatisfaction is the measure of one's superiority, right? For example, if you are happy with this small little poem, and somebody else says, oh, this is stupid, it is senseless, suddenly you feel inferior. It never occurs to you that the person who dismisses this poem as inferior or stupid may have no literary sensibility at all. Why does it happen? It happens because the spirit of our time, the spirit of this age, is a spirit that refuses to see significance in the simple, the familiar, and the commonplace. And we need to become aware of it, because this principle robs our life of a lot of meaning, a lot of excitement, a lot of freshness, a lot of richness. So our theme was richness, right? Asking questions towards the enrichment of our life. That was a question? Right. I hope this principle is understood. I'll put it slightly differently now so that this gets embedded in our mind. The preoccupation nowadays is with the magnitude or the presumed greatness of what we receive. For example, if somebody gives you an ordinary ballpoint pen costing maybe 5 rupees, and somebody else gives you a very expensive pen, Mont Blanc or whatever, which costs 27,000 rupees, you feel greatly elated because of this expensive pen, but it never occurs to you to ask what you're going to do with this pen. Am I right? A masterpiece with a ballpoint pen. You may write obscenity with the Mont Blanc 27,000 pen. What use is it then? So the important thing is not in the magnitude of what you receive, but in the greatness of what you do with it. All right? Is that understood? So you may go to South America to see the Amazon flowing, right? The great Amazon. You may only go and see a small river somewhere nearby. But if your ability to reflect on the meaning of a river is zero, what difference does it make that you spend all the money to go to see the Amazon? You will come back like an item of baggage, that's all. On the other hand, if you have developed your sensibilities, your thinking abilities, you will go to a small little rivulet and write a poem. What is greater? Now these things must be understood in our times, because the culture in which you are growing up, which is a culture driven by certain very shallow presuppositions that are meant to take away from you, to expropriate from you your initiative, your abilities, your creativity, and to make you completely dependent on what this industrial commercial culture can offer to you as a finished product, where you don't have to do anything at all except remain a consumer. I believe that this arrangement will cripple you completely. And I cannot exaggerate the serious dangers imminent in this. Today I'm going to pick up an expression from Joanna's speech and develop it further. You heard the speech, I also heard the speech. All right? I'm going to take up an expression just to illustrate the same point. What is the difference She said, for example, in our youth, we must make an effort to use its energies and potentials to the utmost, right? You said that. When I was listening to her, a short story came to my mind. Actually, before I came into the hall and we were all sitting together in the staff room, I asked Mr. Renish Abraham as to what I should say this morning. You may not know this, I derive all my wisdom from others. I have nothing that I can call my own. So he said, continue with your literature. I said, obeyed. I also said, it is in obedience that I find my freedom. I don't know if you know this. Without obedience, there is no freedom. But if I go into that subject, you will wake up only tomorrow. So let me come back to the literature part. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. Anyone familiar with the name of Edgar Allan Poe? All right, doesn't matter. He wrote a short story called Dr. Heidegger's Experiment. Dr. Heidegger's Experiment. Actually, I read this story by mistake. I turned to the story somewhat deceived by the title because of my interest in Heidegger. I thought this would have something very important to tell me about Heidegger, which I had not known before. So I began reading, and I found that I was completely taken for a ride by Edgar Allan Poe. The story goes like this. There is a man who specializes in the occult, magical powers, etc. And he created a particular potion, kind of sparkling water, which if consumed will restore you to your youth. That's why I remembered it. Youth. I forget the names of characters. The person who has this, who is conducting these experiments is Dr. Heidegger. But I also remember the name of the lady character. She is Widow Wycherley. Widow Wycherley. There are three other male characters whose names I forget. I don't know why. Now, what happens is they're all old, and Dr. Heidegger calls them and says, you see, I've got this very interesting potion, and you see the power of this. So he opens a book, his magical book, and takes out an old withered rose, about 60 years old, almost crumbling, powdery, and he puts that into this water. And suddenly it becomes like the old, luscious red rose. And he says, look, this has the same power on you. If you can drink this, you will all become young. So they were all ready for the experiment. So Dr. Heidegger gives them a glass each of this water. And suddenly the effect can be seen. From being very old, they become of the middle age. So they're eager for more. They want to be young. They ask Heidegger, why don't you also drink? He says, no, I will keep out of it because I have to conduct the experiment. Right? By the way, that's another very interesting thing. If you want to do something, you have to keep out of it. Don't get into it. For example, if you want to help the young people, do not become and behave like the young people. This is a mistake that many teachers commit. They think that they have to be like the young people. If you're like the young people, you can't help them. You have to be different from the young people to be helped them. A philosopher once said, you must be different from the world for the sake of the world. You understand? You have to be different from the world for the sake of the world. Because if you are like the world, you can do no good to the world. Okay? So Dr. Heidegger keeps out of this experiment. So he gives them another glass of the same potion. And suddenly they become blooming young people. And in the meanwhile, Widow Wycherley is also an extremely, stunningly beautiful young lass. Right? So what happens now? All three of them fall in love with her. Right? And all three of them have an equal claim on Widow Wycherley, who is now a young, beautiful girl. And they fight with each other. Each man's hand is on his friend's throat. Right? And they fight bitterly, vigorously. And the fight reaches its zenith, and in the process, the table on which this potion is kept gets overturned. And the vase in which this magical potion was kept falls down and shatters into 100 pieces. And then what happens? Their youth evaporates. And soon enough, they become old. They're back to their original state. Now, what is the meaning of this story? The story asks or raises a question. The question is, what will you do with your youth? What are you doing with your youth? People who have lost their youth nostalgically long for or look back to their days of youth. Those were the days, my friend. But my dear friend, what did you do in those days, my dear friend? How did you use your youth with all its potentialities and possibilities? According to Edgar Allan Poe, all that you did with your youth was to reduce its scope only to this beautiful woman called Wycherley. That's why you fought. All three of them, because they became young, could see only one thing in the world. That was not the problem when they were old. They were getting along very well. They were friendly. They had other things to discuss. One was a politician, the other was a doctor or whatever. They had other things to discuss. Their mental horizon was wide. But the moment they became young, their world narrowed itself into just this one beautiful woman. And what is the consequence? The consequence is a bitter fight. And I think there is a great insight in that story. All of us need to ask ourselves the question, are we good custodians of our youth? Are we in a position, or do we care to enter into the tremendous possibilities of being young? Or have we reduced everything to this one little thing? It may not be a beautiful woman, it may be a car, it may be eating, it may be roaming around, it may be pornography, it may be something. Something on account of which the immense possibilities of life suddenly vanish from your frame of reference and your personality gets so severely constricted. Therefore, my friends, there is a need to ask the question, am I young? If I am young, in what sense am I young? What is the meaning, what is the scope of my youth? What is the best way to make use of the potentialities and possibilities of being young? To what extent am I doing it? If I am not doing justice to my youth, why is it so? And in what respect do I have to change? And if I have to change in this respect, why not now rather than tomorrow? You understand the seriousness of it? Being young means nothing if you do not understand that it is a great privilege and a great opportunity, a great responsibility. And the way you use your youth will actually define the way you live the rest of your life. Okay? There is a line in Wordsworth where he says, blessed was in those days, he was actually recollecting the French Revolution. Blessed was in those days to have been alive, but to be young was very heaven. What is heaven? What is heaven? Being young. Do you realize it? Do you realize it? Blessed was in those days to have been alive, but to be young is very heaven. Right? You are in that wonderful state. And my prayer for you is that you would also have the wisdom to be responsible custodians, wise stewards of this most precious period in your life. You know, when you are young, your memory, all your mental powers function beautifully. Especially memory. When you reach my age, it's a struggle all the time. At your age, I could sit and read for 24 hours. It was never a problem. But now, if I can read for 1 hour without my body cracking up, I feel grateful. You are at that stage in your life when you can stretch your possibilities to incredible extents. Do not waste your time. Do not waste your talent. Do not corrupt yourself. Do not let these great opportunities go by. Right? You've come to the right place and you must have the right understanding. That's why we have assemblies. Okay? Shall we therefore now take a decision that we will try and take good care of our youth? Right? Will we do that? I want conviction. Absolutely? Yeah, that is it. And those who take good care of your youth will have a quality of life that nothing in the world can take away from them. It is so important for you to know this. I also want, and I'll close by saying this, I also want you to know and be forewarned that the culture and the age in which you are living is a culture that is hostile to youth. You know, when HIV/AIDS came onto the scene, the most important message that virtually leapt up at me was that this is an age, this is a disease, this is a problem programmed to attack the youth. The people most vulnerable to HIV/AIDS infection are in the age group of 15 to 40, the prime of your life. It's actually the disease of the young. And I found in it profound symbolic overtones. I'm not a scientist, but I said I'm going to tackle this with whatever resources I have. I plunged into that work and worked and worked and worked for 7 long years. It resulted in the production of 2 books and 2 documentaries. I was the very first to produce a documentary on HIV/AIDS in this country. Because I found in it a frontal challenge to the youth, which I believe is a great problem, a great challenge to a teacher. Because a teacher lives his or her life with young people. May we rise for prayer. In our prayer this morning, we will pray for